The late summer sun of September 1943 beat down relentlessly on the vast, undulating cornfields of rural Iowa, stretching like an endless golden-green tapestry to the horizon. The air hummed with the buzz of cicadas and the rustle of dry corn stalks, a sound that ordinarily heralded the annual harvest, a time of sweat, toil, and ultimately, abundance. But this year, a striking tableau unfolded across the heartland. Scattered amongst the fields, under the watchful eyes of armed American guards, hundreds of men in drab work clothes moved methodically, their movements synchronized by necessity. They spoke in German, their accents thick, their faces often streaked with dirt and sweat. These were not American farmhands. They were enemy soldiers, prisoners of war deployed to save a critical harvest. It was a staggering reality few Americans fully comprehended at the time. By 1945, over 425,000 German prisoners of war would be held on American soil, a number that far surpassed the public's perception of their presence. These men were housed in some 700 camps distributed across 46 states, a secret army within the nation's borders. The irony was profound and almost unthinkable. While their countrymen starved under Allied bombardment and the strains of total war, these German soldiers, captured and interned, were now diligently working to preserve America's vital food supply. This paradoxical situation would eventually lead to a quiet, yet monumental admission from the United States Department of Agriculture. They saved the war crop, a statement that spoke volumes of a forgotten chapter in American history. As the United States plunged deeper into World War II, its industrial might quickly geared towards military production. Factories hummed, shipyards roared, and young men, fueled by patriotism, enthusiastically enlisted or were drafted into the armed forces. This mass mobilization, while crucial for the war effort, created an unforeseen and rapidly escalating crisis on the home front, a severe depletion of the agricultural labor force. The nation's farms, the very backbone of its food supply, found themselves critically understaffed. By 1943, key agricultural regions reported their workforce had been reduced by a staggering 30–40%, with some areas facing even more dire shortages. The implications were catastrophic. Crops like corn, cotton, and sugar beets, essential for feeding the nation and its allies, as well as providing raw materials for uniforms and explosives, were at severe risk. Fields of produce ready for harvest threatened to rot where they stood if no hands were found to bring them in. The government, particularly the United States Department of Agriculture, watched with growing alarm. Projections indicated potential food shortages, a scenario that could cripple morale on the home front and undermine the war effort itself. America needed food, and desperately, it needed labor. In this precarious situation, an unlikely solution presented itself, albeit one fraught with ethical and logistical complexities: the utilization of prisoner of war labor. The Third Geneva Convention, ratified by both the United States and Germany, contained a crucial provision, Article 27, which permitted the use of POWs for non-military labor, provided it was safe, paid, and conducted under humane conditions. For the American authorities, this presented a strategic opportunity. The hundreds of thousands of captured enemy soldiers, who otherwise represented a logistical liability, requiring food, housing, and supervision, could be transformed into a vital asset. The challenge was immense. Transporting, housing, and supervising such a large transient workforce across a vast country required unprecedented coordination. Military authorities had to work in conjunction with agricultural agencies, setting up a system of main camps and smaller branch camps wherever labor was needed. It was a wartime improvisation on a grand scale, designed to address an immediate and existential threat to the nation's food security. The agricultural heartland of America, particularly the Midwest, became the epicenter of this unprecedented labor deployment. Its vast, fertile plains, coupled with relatively lower security risks compared to coastal or industrial areas, made it an ideal location for establishing POW camps. States like Iowa, Nebraska, Kansas, and Illinois became leaders in hosting these camps and employing POW labor. For instance, Iowa, a perennial corn powerhouse, eventually hosted over 50,000 German POWs, primarily for corn harvesting. Initially, local communities often reacted with a mixture of apprehension and outright resistance. The idea of enemy soldiers, often depicted as brutal invaders in wartime propaganda, working alongside American citizens was deeply unsettling for many. However, as the harvest seasons progressed and the stark reality of the labor shortage became undeniable, the economic necessity of the POWs' presence slowly outweighed initial fears. Farmers, facing ruin, began to grudgingly accept and often welcome the foreign hands that arrived to save their livelihoods. Among the hundreds of thousands was Hans Müller, a young man from Bavaria who had been conscripted into the Wehrmacht. He had fought bravely, or perhaps desperately, in the desert campaigns of North Africa, only to be captured by Allied forces. His journey to America was a jarring transition, from the sands of Tunisia to the bustling docks of New York, and finally, to the flat, unending expanse of rural Iowa. His new home was Camp Algona, a sprawling compound of barracks and barbed wire fences, a stark contrast to the small village he'd left behind. His first impressions of America were of overwhelming abundance. The sheer quantity of food, the size of the portions, the availability of consumer goods. It was all a bewildering spectacle compared to the rationing and scarcity that gripped his homeland. His daily life was a rhythmic cycle. 6 a.m. wake-up calls, a basic but hearty breakfast, followed by supervised work details out in the fields. Under the watchful eyes of armed guards, he and his comrades spent their days harvesting corn, their hands quickly callousing, their bodies aching from unaccustomed labor. In the evenings, after a day of strenuous work, Hans would often write letters home, carefully censoring his descriptions of American plenty to avoid upsetting his family, yet subtly conveying the stark difference in circumstances. Slowly, incrementally, the identity of a soldier began to recede, replaced by the muscle memory and routines of an agricultural worker. He was no longer just a soldier. He was a reluctant farmer, an unwilling participant in America's wartime harvest. For farmers like John Patterson, whose family had tilled the same Iowa soil for 3 generations, the arrival of German POWs was initially a bitter pill to swallow. His 2 sons were serving overseas, and the thought of enemy soldiers working on his land, while his own boys fought them, was deeply unsettling. Yet the reality of the labor shortage was undeniable. Without them, John would later recount to his grandchildren, his voice etched with the memory of that trying time, we'd have lost everything. The corn would have just stood there and rotted. His initial suspicion slowly morphed into a grudging respect, then for some, even a cautious camaraderie. The Germans worked hard, often efficiently. In the vast, quiet fields, communication often transcended language. Shared meals, broken English phrases, and the common understanding of hard labor forged an unexpected connection. Yet the underlying tension of wartime never fully dissipated. Security remained a paramount concern, with guards constantly present, and stories of the occasional escape attempt, often short-lived with escapees quickly apprehended, sometimes after simply looking for a bigger meal or better cigarettes, served as a reminder of their status. Life in the POW camps was highly structured. The men rose at dawn, ate breakfast in the mess halls, and then were transported to their various work sites. The labor was physically demanding, often under harsh weather conditions. They harvested corn in the vast fields of Iowa, picked cotton in the scorching sun of Texas, and processed sugar beets in Nebraska. The work was vital, and the POWs often surprisingly adapted quickly. Many had come from rural backgrounds in Germany, and even those from urban areas soon learned the rhythms of farm work. For their labor, the POWs received 80 cents per day in camp scrip, which could be exchanged for goods at the camp canteen, cigarettes, toiletries, an occasional chocolate bar. While their pay was modest and carefully controlled, their basic needs were generously met by American standards. Mail from home was a lifeline, but for many, writing letters was also an opportunity to share their astonishment at the abundant food, plentiful meat, fresh bread, sugar, a stark contrast to the deprivation back in Germany. These observations, though unintended, became a subtle form of propaganda, filtering back to their families. Despite the inherent barriers, cultural exchanges were inevitable. Language was the most immediate hurdle, but gestures, simple phrases, and the universal language of shared tasks often bridged the gap. American guards and farmers sometimes picked up rudimentary German phrases, and many POWs learned enough English to communicate basic needs. Food, however, was perhaps the most profound point of cultural divergence and fascination. German POWs were often astounded by the sheer quantity and variety of food offered in the American camps, something many fondly remembered years later. Meals were typically American fare, often incorporating local specialties, and the men ate well, a stark contrast to the increasingly meager rations their families faced. While direct friendships across the barbed wire were rare and often discouraged, the shared experience of daily labor, the occasional friendly gesture, and the simple act of seeing each other as human beings fostered a strange, temporary understanding that transcended wartime animosity. These were not always skills transferred in the traditional sense, but shared experiences that shaped perspectives. The impact of German POW labor on American agriculture during World War II was nothing short of monumental. While precise, all-encompassing statistics are challenging to consolidate from disparate wartime records, contemporary USDA reports and regional analyses paint a clear picture of their indispensable contribution. Millions of acres of vital crops, from corn to cotton, from sugar beets to fruits and vegetables, were brought in thanks to these foreign hands. The economic value of their labor was immense, with conservative estimates placing the saved crop value in the hundreds of millions of dollars in 1940s currency, a figure that would translate to billions today. Productivity metrics, though varied, often showed POW units working with surprising efficiency, sometimes matching or even exceeding the output of available civilian workers, especially after initial training. Regional variations in crop types, climate, and local labor demands meant their contributions differed, but the overarching narrative remained consistent. Wherever the POWs were deployed, agricultural yields were stabilized or increased at a critical time. The Corn Belt states, predictably, saw some of the most significant impacts. Iowa, with its extensive corn acreage, relied heavily on its over 50,000 POWs to harvest its record crops, ensuring vital food and feed production. In Nebraska, the sugar beet industry, which provided a crucial source of sugar during wartime rationing, was effectively saved from collapse by POW labor. Without them, countless tons of beets would have spoiled, creating a national shortage of an essential commodity. Illinois, with its diversified agriculture, utilized POWs across a wider range of crops, including vegetables and grains. Even the vast wheat fields of Kansas saw POWs deployed, adapting quickly to different agricultural demands and helping to maintain the nation's breadbasket output. Across these states, the POWs became an integral, if temporary, component of the wartime agricultural machine, ensuring that America continued to feed its population, its armed forces, and its allies. The United States Department of Agriculture, initially reluctant to fully acknowledge the necessity of enemy labor, eventually became its staunchest advocate. Internal memos, official reports, and correspondence from the period reveal a growing understanding, and later, an explicit appreciation for the POW's work. Statistical evidence, meticulously collected by agricultural agents, showed undeniable correlations between the deployment of POW units and successful harvests in areas suffering severe labor shortages. Perhaps the most potent acknowledgement came from high-ranking USDA officials. While a single, easily quotable public statement may be elusive, the sentiment was clear in numerous reports and in the collective understanding of those in charge of the nation's food supply. They understood that these men had prevented a collapse. The admission, "They saved the war crop," circulated within the department, recognizing the critical role these enemy soldiers played in America's wartime economy and food security. It was a testament to a pragmatic solution born of necessity, regardless of political or nationalistic sentiments. The system was not without its challenges. Language barriers frequently complicated instructions and supervision, leading to initial inefficiencies. Many POWs, especially those from urban backgrounds, had little to no experience with farm work, requiring on-the-job training. Weather conditions and the tight timelines of harvest season often added immense pressure, demanding quick adaptation and hard labor. However, pragmatism often prevailed. Farmers and guards developed ingenious methods of communication, using gestures, diagrams, and simplified commands. POWs with prior agricultural experience often stepped up to lead work teams. The need for security had to be carefully balanced with the need for efficiency. While guards were always present, overbearing supervision would only hinder productivity. The sheer scale of the operation, coupled with the critical stakes, forced both sides to find common ground and overcome obstacles, creating a unique temporary partnership. The story of German POWs harvesting American fields is steeped in profound irony. Here were enemy soldiers, clad in uniforms that had once represented a formidable threat, now diligently working to feed the very nation that sought to defeat their homeland. The moral complexities were immense. On one hand, these men were treated humanely, often better fed than they had been in their own military or than their families back home. On the other hand, they were still adversaries, their labor coerced by the circumstances of war. The experience inadvertently served as a powerful propaganda tool. The abundance of food and relative comfort of the POW camps, often relayed in letters home, painted a stark contrast to the deprivation and destruction gripping wartime Germany. This unintentional, home-front impact showcased America's economic strength and resourcefulness, even as it utilized enemy labor. It was a stark reminder of the global nature of the conflict and the strange ways in which human needs and political realities intersected. The wartime agricultural labor crisis and its resolution through POW deployment left a lasting mark on American agriculture. It underscored the vulnerability of manual labor-intensive farming and spurred further investment in mechanization. The lessons learned in managing and deploying large temporary workforces also influenced post-war labor policies and programs, particularly for migrant workers. On an international relations level, the treatment of POWs in accordance with the Geneva Convention, including their deployment for productive labor, upheld America's commitment to international law. This adherence, despite being at war, contributed to the nation's reputation and potentially eased post-war reconciliation efforts. Regionally, the establishment of numerous POW camps led to temporary infrastructure improvements in many rural areas, providing a brief economic boost to local communities. As the war drew to a close, the repatriation of hundreds of thousands of German POWs presented its own set of challenges. Many, having experienced the relative prosperity and freedom of American life compared to the devastation awaiting them in Germany, were reluctant to return. There are numerous accounts of POWs expressing a desire to stay, and some did, eventually returning years later as immigrants to the land where they had once been prisoners. The agricultural legacy of the POWs continued in subtle ways. While the direct labor ceased, the experiences shared between American farmers and German POWs, the techniques learned, and the sheer scale of the successful harvests became part of local lore. More broadly, the shared experience, however involuntary, laid groundwork for future reconciliation, as former enemies now held shared memories of toil under the American sun, a small but significant step towards rebuilding relationships. Despite its profound impact, the story of German POWs saving America's war crop largely faded from popular memory. Historical amnesia set in quickly after the war, overshadowed by grander narratives of victory and heroism. For many American veterans, discussing the enemy working alongside them was complex, sometimes seen as unpatriotic or simply less heroic than battlefield exploits. Similarly, German POWs, returning to a shattered homeland, often found it difficult to recount tales of American abundance amidst widespread suffering. Academic attention to this particular facet of World War II history was also limited for many years, focusing more on military campaigns or domestic industry. As a result, this significant contribution remained largely unacknowledged in mainstream historical accounts. Only in regional communities, particularly in the Midwest, did the memory persist. passed down through generations of farming families who vividly remembered the German boys who helped them survive. In recent decades, a resurgence of interest has brought this forgotten chapter back into the light. Archaeological digs at former POW campsites have unearthed remnants of daily life, providing tangible links to the past. Oral history projects, meticulously recording the recollections of elderly farmers and surviving POWs, have been instrumental in piecing together individual experiences and broader narratives. German archives and personal memoirs have also yielded valuable insights, offering the POWs' own perspectives on their time in America, often marked by astonishment at the good food and fair treatment. Crucially, the deeper dive into USDA archives has revealed the official documentation and statistical data that unequivocally prove the critical role these prisoners played, adding weight and authority to anecdotal evidence. The story of the POW's agricultural labor carries surprising contemporary relevance. It offers a unique historical parallel to ongoing debates about migrant labor and immigration, illustrating the enduring reliance of agriculture on diverse workforces, often from outside the local population. It highlights the perennial challenge of food security, reminding us of the fragility of supply chains and the constant need for labor to feed a nation. Moreover, it stands as a testament to international cooperation, even amidst the most bitter conflict. The adherence to humanitarian principles, codified in the Geneva Convention, allowed for a pragmatic solution that benefited both captor and captive. It speaks to the concept of human dignity, suggesting that even enemies can find common ground and contribute positively when treated with respect and given meaningful work. This narrative serves as a powerful reminder that history is often far more nuanced and complex than popular memory suggests. The numbers, once hidden or downplayed, now tell an undeniable story. Over 425,000 German POWs, deployed across 700 camps in 46 states, harvested millions of acres of vital crops, ensuring America's food supply during its most trying modern conflict. This unprecedented mobilization of enemy labor was a logistical marvel and an economic necessity. The USDA's eventual, if understated, admission, "They saved the war crop," stands as the ultimate testament to their indispensable contribution. Beyond the statistics, there was a profound human cost and benefit. For the American farmers, it was the salvation of their livelihoods and the prevention of widespread agricultural collapse. For the German POWs, it was a period of relative safety, good food, and exposure to an entirely different way of life, experiences that would shape their post-war existence. It is a story that, belatedly, offers a measure of historical justice, acknowledging the overlooked efforts of those who toiled in America's fields during a global war. This unique chapter of history leaves us with enduring questions. What if America had been unable to secure this labor? Would the war effort have been significantly hampered by domestic food shortages? The moral complexity of using enemy labor, even under humane conditions, prompts reflection on the pragmatism versus idealism during wartime. It also highlights the selective nature of memory and forgetting, urging us to question why certain stories are elevated while others fade into obscurity. The lessons for today are clear: the importance of resilience in food systems, the multifaceted nature of labor, and the surprising ways in which cooperation can emerge, even from conflict. Ultimately, the story of German POWs harvesting corn in the American Midwest is a powerful reflection on the enduring truth that sometimes enemies save each other. It is a tale of profound historical irony. German soldiers, prisoners of the United States, inadvertently helped win the war against Germany by stabilizing the American home front. It speaks to a fundamental human connection that can transcend national boundaries and ideological divides, forged in the shared effort of honest work. This harvest of memory, once buried beneath layers of wartime propaganda and post-war silence, deserves to be preserved for future generations, a unique and poignant reminder of a forgotten contribution to World War II history.